Hi there, my name is Jim Simpson and I lead product management here at Duo Security. Thanks for joining me today. We are going to be talking about 3 ways to secure BYOD, mobile and cloud, and we're going to introduce you to Duo's new single sign-on. Before we get started, I just wanted to say thank you for joining us. If you're our customers, we really appreciate you being part of this process, and thank you to my Duo colleagues who are listening in and observing. I represent hundreds of Duo employees behind the scenes who are making it possible for me to be here today. And for everyone else, I hope you gain something interesting out of this. Perhaps it will spark some joy in your life. Some quick housekeeping notes. There is a chat window. We highly encourage you to take advantage of that and ask questions. I have some assistants here who will get some of those questions to me, and we have some surveys as well. I'm going to jump into the agenda really quick, do a quick welcome. We'll talk about Duo's roadmap, some of the things that we've done in the last couple of quarters, and some of the things that are coming up. We'll talk about trusted access and single sign-on. We'll talk about tigers, and we'll have a wrap-up at the end. So you're probably wondering why I have a tiger here next to me, and if you joined us previously, we had a tiger there, and it was so popular that we got another tiger. The interesting thing about this tiger is it does not yet have a name, and so we're actually looking to you to help us name this thing. And the way it's going to work is at the end of the webinar, we'll have a poll in which you can actually suggest names, and if you're so interested, your email address, because what we're going to do is once we have all of those in, we're going to take all of those names and have everyone in the company vote on those names, and whoever's name is picked, they will get a $50 Amazon gift card. So your odds are much better at doing that than winning the lottery, and we look forward to what you have to say. I don't recommend Tiger McTigerface. I might just veto that one right off the bat. And also, this tiger does not necessarily represent users in any meetings or any kind of strange startup stuff like that. It's just a stuffed tiger that we like. So, moving right along, most recently I had an opportunity to go meet with a lot of customers at a particular event. And one of the things that we often do in our surveys and in discussing with customers, we're always asking questions around, what are you doing for BYOD? Like, what is your IDP? What kind of applications are you trying to protect in the cloud? And the interesting thing about this event is actually I had an opportunity to get to know a lot of you much better. And one of the interesting things about that is just figuring out, like, well, what are the things you are interested in? And so we're curious here, just to get you warmed up with taking survey polls and seeing what that's like. What is your favorite pop culture space franchise? Is it Star Wars, Star Trek, Babylon 5, or Battlestar Galactica? And you can go to duo.sc/sci-fi to try that out. And while you're doing that, I'm going to talk a little bit about our future and go over the roadmap of the things that we've done recently and the stuff that we've got coming out. So earlier this year, we released updates to our device insight dashboard. This was meant to give you more information, go further in depth on the kinds of things that you can see using Duo's Platform Edition. We also did more with the Mobile Insight dashboard, so more data is available around analysis and vulnerability assessment. We released 9 new cloud app integrations via SAML. And then for all of our customers, we put in a new feature that allows you to do a better staged rollout. So if you're just getting an area of your organization up and running, you have an opportunity by using our group access policy to say, you know what, I want to protect all of these applications with 2-factor authentication. However, I only want a subset of users to actually be prompted until you've seen some success with that, at which point you can actually roll it out more broadly in your organization. We've also taken end-user accessibility a lot more seriously. Previously, we were fortunate in just the way we did development that a lot of our products were accessible, but we started working with some customers out there who said that accessibility is actually a requirement, and we worked with them to determine what, in terms of our end-user facing features, needed to be updated. And so we've done a lot of updates around our authentication prompt and our enrollment process, and also with our mobile applications. We've also taken an opportunity to work within the admin panel itself, and so accessibility is now part of our day-to-day in development, much like usability has always been. Now, last but not least, we also released a new Windows Mobile app. If you are using Windows Mobile for a long time, we've only had a single account available in it. This is a modern application that's available on Windows 10 and Windows 8. And so if you haven't had a chance to upgrade, please do. Just recently, we released something called Access Control, and this allows you to do blocking when it comes to devices that don't meet a certain security hygiene when they're going to access applications. We also released single sign-on for Duo Access Gateway, and we'll go into depth on that during this webinar, so I'll come back to it. And then finally, a lot of you who've been making use of our Device Insight feature have asked for us to make that data available through our APIs. And so now you can get a lot of that information out of the administrative API and pull it into whatever services that you're looking to use it in. For all of our customers, if you're using Active Directory synchronization, we now support Active Directory attribute mapping. And so you can pull more of the information over from Active Directory into Duo and line it up with the various fields that we have in there, because as we've learned, not every customer uses the same fields within Active Directory. We also have made sure that all of our integrations are working with all of the Windows Server 2016 ecosystem. And we released an integration for Oracle Access Manager if you're using that. Now, coming up this quarter, for our Platform Edition customers, we're going to be updating our networks policy. If you've used Trusted Networks before, it's a way to essentially whitelist NetBlocks to allow users to access particular applications from those NetBlocks. This is actually making it a more formal part of policy where you can actually create access control rules around it and actively block or whitelist depending on where the customers or where the end user is coming from. We're also going to improve the Duo Access Gateway deployments, and we also will be making it possible for you to do remediation for mobile devices. So if you're using the self-remediation feature right now, it will help your end users keep their laptops and desktops up to date with browsers, plugins, and operating systems. And we'll be releasing some functionality that allows you to set that up for mobile devices as well, like iOS and Android. And we're going to be releasing Azure Active Directory synchronization. And what's cool about this is if you're an organization that's currently using Active Directory and you're looking at using Azure Active Directory, we're going to create a migration path there to help you with that process and to keep all of your applications and users safe while you make that transition. We'll be releasing a Splunk add-in, so if you are using Splunk to do any kind of log analysis, we'll have a snap-in that will work with our administrative API to give you some heads-up information about what's going on. Now, this is our first version of a Splunk add-in, so if you have feedback on that, please let us know because we'd like to enhance it as we go on. And then last but not least, I'm really excited for us to finally be updating our Windows Logon GUI. If you've used this previously, you enter in your standard primary credentials, and then right now you get this box where you have to enter in a passcode or push, and it's not particularly user-friendly, and we've had it as a goal to make this just as great as our regular authentication prompt to make it even easier for your users to interact with this, and so that'll be coming out as well. We've got a lot more for Platform Edition in 2017, so I hope that you'll join me at the next webinar where we talk more about those. And then some of the other things we're doing across the board is providing better reporting and analysis. We'll be doing some updates to our authentication proxy. And last but not least, we'll also be enhancing that new Windows Login GUI to support chained credentials. So if you're using something like a smart card for your first factor, you'll also be able to use that in conjunction with Duo for your second factor. So without further ado, the first survey results, 46% of you are Star Wars fans, 31% of you are Star Trek fans, 12% are Battlestar Galactica fans, and the rest of you are Babylon 5 fans. Shout out to the Babylon 5 people. All right, so last time we met and did one of these webinars, we also asked a survey question at the very end, but we didn't have a chance to actually share the survey results with you. And that was around the types of devices, mobile, desktop, laptop, that are allowed to access work applications. We were curious, like, what is your policy around this? And 40% of you said that personal devices without restrictions are allowed to access work applications. 8% of you said personal devices if they're up to date. And Platform Edition is something that can actually help you with this. It's a very easy way to get up and running, no agents, and it can help your end users keep their personal devices up to date and reduce that risk. Personal devices if they're managed, and then finally only corporate-owned devices. There were 36% of that. So we did this survey about 6 months ago, and we're curious to find out if that's changed at all. And so if you have a moment, we'd love to know what types of devices are allowed to access work applications. And we hope that maybe some of those numbers have changed because you're making use of Duo's Platform Edition. And to take that survey, you can go to duo.sc/devices. So, jumping into trusted access. What is trusted access? Well, traditionally, when it comes to security, there's a number of different solutions that administrators have to stitch together in order to have good security posture. And so you have solutions that are focused on the user, like identity management and two-factor. You have solutions which are focused on the devices, endpoint management, making sure that antivirus is up to date. There are solutions to ensure that the network is behaving well and there's nothing malicious happening there. And then finally, there are solutions that are focused on application access and determining, well, who should have access to those applications and under what circumstances. Unfortunately, it means that good security can seem pretty complicated. And from our perspective, pardon me, complexity is the enemy of good security. If something is complicated, it's much harder to use and deploy, and so there's less of a likelihood that it's going to be successful. So looking at this, these siloed solutions here around users, devices, networks, and applications, we have a different approach to this, and we like to call this Duo's Trusted Access. It's a holistic way to address some of these problems, and it simplifies security, which makes it a lot more likely that you can practice good security. We protect organizations by verifying the identity of their users and checking the health of their devices before granting access to the applications that they need. And I'll go into each of these areas of focuses just a little bit. So we're going to start off with trusted users, and if you've been with us for a while, some of this will seem familiar, but it's all about letting the right people in. And so I'm going to show you how that works. This right here is a Juniper Pulse, this is a Pulse Secure Pulse Connect VPN. And what I'm going to do right now is actually enroll and show you what it looks like for end users when they go to enroll in the process. So the very first time any of your end users would use this is they would be asked, hey, you know what? You need to protect your Duo account here. And what I'm doing is getting my Duo mobile application ready so we can jump through this. And it walks them through this very simply. So it's going to ask me, well, what kind of device am I using? And I'm going to say I'm using a tablet here. It's an iOS device. You can see there's a number of different options. And then it's going to ask me to install Duo Mobile for iOS. Now, of course, I already have that installed, so I don't need to go to the App Store, but it's very easy if you have to do that. And it's installed, and once I've got this installed, it's going to actually put up a barcode there. I'm going to scan that barcode, and now it's actually activated here on my mobile device. I'm going to go ahead and click Continue. Now that's it to get a user up and running with Duo and protect them with two-factor. This also makes sure that that user is who he or she says she is when they're going to authenticate to different applications. Once the user sets up their initial device, they have some options here. They can choose to add another device, for example, a landline in case they need a backup in the event that their mobile device is lost. And also, they have an opportunity down here to set what that default device is if they have more than one, and whether or not they just want that to automatically be activated when they go to, be the automatic option when they go to log in. And so our perspective on this is the easier it is for somebody to do authentication, the more likely it is that they are going to. So we want to reduce that friction. So they have the opportunity here to say something like, hey, you know what? Every single time I go to log in, just automatically send this device a push. But I'm just going to leave it as ask me to choose an authentication method because I like options. And I'm going to choose to continue to log in. So if I'd been coming to this after I'd been set up, I would have logged in with my primary credentials, and then I would choose an authentication method here. And I'm going to say, send me a push. So I've sent a push to my mobile device. And since I have it paired with my Apple Watch here, I'm just going to tap here once, boom. It's approved, and I'm in. And so that's a very easy way to protect your users and validate that they are the right users and the ones that you should be letting in. Now that's the user-facing side of this. What's really great here is everything that's happening on the administration side. So I'm going to go ahead and log into the administrative console here. Again, just an easy tap to get in on my Apple Watch. I swear I don't work for Apple. And so here is the dashboard when we log in. And if I scroll down here, you can see that as users are authenticating, we're getting that information. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the full authentication log to give you some insight into what's going on here. So you can see when the user logs in, what application they're logging into, what the event was, what happened, and there's some very interesting telemetry around that. And so this is part of what happens every single time a user authenticates within Duo. We're actually getting this information to help you make better decisions around the security hygiene that's required in order for those users to access applications, especially within context of whatever that application is. And so you can see when this person logged in, they were using a Mac OS X device running 10.10, Chrome, the versions of Flash, the country they were coming from, and the second factor. And what's really cool about all of this is that if you want to, you can pull all this data from our administrative API and put it into your log management system and do whatever it is you want with it. And then the other great thing about this is it's giving you insight into the devices that those users are using when they're authenticating. And so I'm going to jump over here really quick, and before we go into the next section, I'm going to follow up on that question that we had earlier around what types of devices are allowed to access work applications. And so 39% of you said personal device with no restrictions, which is about the same as before. 26% of you said only corporate managed devices, which is a little bit less. 23% said personal devices if they're managed. And finally, 13% of you said personal devices if they're up to date. And so I'm hoping that's because you're using Duo's Platform Edition and it's helping you do that. But let's talk a little bit about trusted devices and why that's important. So we're going to go over here really quick, and I'm going to go up to the Device Insight dashboard here. Now, as users are interacting with the product, as they're logging into applications, every single time they do that, we get information about the devices that they're using and what's going on with those. And it's all here in this dashboard. And so in this particular deployment, we can see that 210 devices are out of date. And there's a really handy link here to edit policy, which I'll come back to later. We can see that 313 devices are up to date. And this is great. And so as an administrator, you don't have to do a lot of analysis yourself. The Duo system will do this for you. And then it also gives you a breakdown of what kind of devices these are. Like 84% of them are laptops and desktops, while the rest of them are mobile devices. And the kinds of information that we'll show you here are things like, what are the devices that have out-of-date operating systems? You can see over time here that this is pretty consistent. Where it starts to get more interesting is when you're looking at things like browsers and plugins. And so I'm going to jump down to the plugins right here just to show you what's going on. So you can see at the beginning of the month here, there's a spike around 100, 83 devices were out of date, and then it starts to trend down. And that's because this system has self-remediation turned on. And so when an end user is interacting with an application and they go to log in for the first time, what'll happen is it'll actually show you, hey, you know what, your device is out of date. And this is how you can go about fixing it. And you, as the administrator, can set a policy that says, if this device is out of date for X amount of time, then block them. But up until that point, the user will be gently reminded, A, they need to update their device, and B, we'll actually show them how they can go about doing that. Now in this case here, you'll see, okay, it starts to trend down and then boom, it jumps up again. And the reason for that is because plugins have updates that come out all of the time. There are hundreds of versions of Flash and Java, and it's really hard for people to stay on top of this. And so Duo's Platform Edition can actually help your end users automate that process. And in working with our end users on this, we learned that a lot of it has to do with a lack of user education around the importance of security hygiene. And if they know that why they need to be kept up to date and that it's easy for them to do so, it's a lot more likely that they are going to do so. All right, so let's see here. So this is the overall view of all the devices, but we also have some dashboards that go a little bit deeper, and they're divided into mobile devices and laptops and desktops. So I'm going to click over to the mobile devices, and you can see the kinds of information that you can get here. There's a breakdown of the different versions of iOS and Android. You can determine whether or not they're rooted or jailbroken. And what we've learned is that a lot of the times administrators will tell us, well, yes, I know, I've actually jailbroken my iOS device because I want to do stuff with this. And we're not so much focused on that problem. Like, what we've learned is it's more the end users themselves who may or may not know that they have installed an agent by virtue of clicking on something that might be exfiltrating data. There was a recent vulnerability called Pegasus on iOS where, you know, by virtue of clicking any link, if a link sent to you via any form of communication, text, email, web, it would quickly install an agent on the device which would start to exfiltrate data. It was a terrible 0-day, and I'll get into some policy that can help you with it in Platform Edition shortly. But you know, those are the things that this is meant to help you with. You can also determine whether or not your end users have screen lock set. Whether or not they've got a fingerprint set, and for Android devices, whether or not disk encryption is set. And there's also policy associated with these things in the event that you want any of this when users are accessing critical applications. Now, when it comes to laptops and desktops, again, there's very similar data here. You get a breakdown of all the different kinds of devices. You can see the different versions of operating systems that they're running. The breakdown of browsers along with the vulnerability analysis of those browsers, which ones are up to date and which ones are out of date. And what's really cool here is for all of these things that you see out of date, it's just one click to go and see who are those users who are out of date, and you can also click here to get a report via CSV, JSON, or a URL if you want to share it with somebody else in your organization about those particular users and their devices that need to be updated. We'll also give you the same kind of information around their web browsers, Safari, Firefox, Edge. And then finally, those plugins that we were talking about just a second ago, which ones are up to date and which ones are out of date. And so Flash has lots of vulnerabilities. And so we can see here that we've got 10 users, they're running different operating systems, and they are out of date. And this will also give you other information as well. And if you want to slice and dice that information, there's some really cool filters here over on the side that will allow you to do that as well. So I mentioned at the very beginning, when you come to this page, you can actually edit policy that can help you prevent some of these things from happening. And so right here it says 210 devices are out of date, edit your policy. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit here and maybe go to the operating systems, and I'm going to choose to edit my policy for that. And so when I click that, it takes me to the policy editor, and it brings me right to the operating systems configuration here. And you can see that for Mac OS X, we will block users if their version is below 10.11, which is pretty strict policy. If I wanted to, I could change that. I could also choose just to warn those users as well. Or, if this isn't something that I want to turn on just yet, I could say, allow all versions. But I'm going to put it on blocking their users if they're below 10.11. And you can see that we have the same controls for Windows and iOS and Android, and this is a way that you can actually help with 0 days. So right here, I'm going to say, like the Pegasus vulnerability, if I wanted to prevent, if I wanted to encourage my users to update to prevent themselves from being potentially breached by that, what I could do is I could say, block those users if their version is below the latest version, because when that vulnerability was announced, Apple had a lot of updates that they pushed out to fix those vulnerabilities. And what I could say is, when users become out of date, they will have 0 days to update. And so in that case, what would happen is it would actually say, there's a vulnerability, you need to update your device. And once they did that, then they would gain access to their application. So this is a way that you can encourage your users to keep their devices, their personal devices, up to date as they're interacting, and prevent things from Pegasus, like being infected by Pegasus and potentially exfiltrating data. Okay. So that is Device Insight and some of the policy that you could build around that, and that's how you can ensure the safety of your end users' devices. Our next question here is around how you secure access to cloud applications. We're we're curious to know, what are the current ways that you're doing it. And so before I jump into the next session, which is all about how we think you might want to consider securing access to cloud applications, we'd love to know what you're doing currently. So you can go to duo.sc/cloud, and we've got a survey there. So every application, last but not least, this is the third part of what we consider trusted access, where we want to help you protect access to every application in your organization, regardless if it's in the cloud or on premises. So let me jump over into our newest feature, which is single sign-on with Duo Access Gateway. So if you've been using Duo Access Gateway, it's a way to bridge, it's a way to protect your cloud applications if you want to protect things like Office 365, Salesforce, Box, you name it. We support hundreds of applications right out of the box. And the way that this works now is by virtue of a user portal. And so if I was using single sign-on with Duo Access Gateway, I would go and, as an end user, I would log into my user portal. And so I'm going to log in. It's jim@duosecurity.com. I'm going to go ahead and press login here. And 1 second here. Let me go back to that. So that didn't quite do what I expected it to. All right. We're going to try this a little differently here. Incognito windows are the savior. So we'll try this again. So as an end user, what I would see here, after I did my primary credentials, is I would see the Duo authentication prompt here. And I have, my different authentication methods. Now, the way that the single sign-on works is as an end user will click, remember me for X number of days, and then they won't have to re-authenticate to the user portal depending on what you set there. And you can set that from anything within the time range of hours to many, many, many days if you'd like to. We recommend, a day, given that it's users are going to be interacting with this throughout their business workday. But I'm going to go ahead and say, send me a push. Actually, first I'm going to check that box, remember me for 30 days. Then I'm going to say, send me a push. And I'll get a login request here. And boom, I'm in. And so once your users log into the Duo Access Gateway, they're going to see a screen that looks much like this, and it will show all the applications that you've configured for them based on whatever group they happen to be in, whether they're administrators, if they are somebody in the IT department, if there's somebody in the marketing department. You can actually control which applications appear based on the group that they're in, and I'll show you a little bit of that in a second. In the upper left-hand corner, of course, if you have a logo set, your company's logo will appear there to ensure that your end users feel safe as they're using this, and it's part of their daily workflow. And so once I've logged in here, I click on Google Drive, and I'm in Google Drive. I click on Salesforce, and I'm in Salesforce. And what's happening behind the scene here, though, that's different from other solutions, is that every time a user is interacting with an application, we're doing health checks on the devices that they're using to access those applications to ensure that they meet the security hygiene that you set for that particular application. And what I'm going to do next is actually show you how to set up some of these groups to show different applications. So I'm going to go over to this here. I'm going to go back to the admin panel, and I'm going to go to applications. And say, I wanted to protect Salesforce. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's find Salesforce in here. I'm going to say protect this application. Now, when I'm setting this up to be protected, I'm going to configure all of this information here, but how this works with single sign-on in the Duo Access Gateway is you scroll down here and then you select the groups that are permitted to use this. And so if you want to limit it to a particular set of groups, you can pick those groups here. Otherwise, it will default appear in all of the users' portals when they're logging in. And so I might want to say, Salesforce, it probably should be associated with sales reps, sales engineers. I'm going to go ahead and save changes, at which point those particular groups of users would see Salesforce appear in their user portal, and other users in the organization wouldn't. And if you have Duo Access Gateway, it's very easy to get up and running with this. We have a documentation on the website under the Duo Access Gateway and duo.com/docs. And if you need more assistance with it, our customer success and technical support teams are happy to help you get up and running with it. Now, like I mentioned a few minutes ago, one of the things that is great about this is as users are interacting with their applications, we're doing those health checks on their devices to make sure that they meet the security hygiene or the security criteria that you set when they're accessing applications. And I want to show you what that looks like in case you haven't had a chance to see it before. So I've got a demo here where, say the user is logging into a portal, and we're going to go ahead and log in here. You'll see that the screen here actually says, you know what, your browser is 20 days out of date, and I can choose to update it. But as an end user, I still have these options here. And so if I were to say, you know what, send me a push, I'm just going to log in anyway. Well, it would send a push to the device. And we would log in, click approve, enter a passcode. Now, it's still let me in, but because my administrator has set a policy that wants to keep me up to date for my browser, it actually reminds that user just before they authenticate or before they get into the application, you know what, Firefox is out of date, you really should update this. And I can still choose to skip this and get my work done, but if the end user chooses to do so, they can go ahead and click here, and it actually takes them to a page which helps them get up to date with that. And so all of this stuff together helps keep your users up to date. And we're going to take a look at the survey results for the last question there. So how are you securing access to cloud applications? Great. 70% of you say single sign-on, so that's good news. 25% of you said nothing, and 15% of you said ADFS. So still a lot of opportunity out there to secure those cloud applications. We have one last survey question before we come to a close here, and we'd like to know how many cloud applications your organization uses. And you can take that survey by going to duo.sc/apps. And so all of that together, trusted users, making sure that the right users are logging in, trusted devices, making sure that those devices are up to date and they have good security hygiene for every application is what we call Trusted Access. You can try Trusted Access out for free if you haven't already by going to the Billing tab in your admin panel, and there's a 30-day trial. If you'd like to talk to our sales team about that, they're happy to help you walk through it. And then finally, last but not least, what should we name my tiger here? The tiger does not have a gender, so please give us some good names here, and you can go ahead and take that survey at duo.sc/tiger. And best of luck. I'm looking forward to sending somebody a $50 Amazon gift card. And I don't know that we have the results for this last part of the survey, but if we don't, we'll share that with you at the next go-around. And that's it. Thank you so much for joining us today at Duo, and we look forward to talking to you in the future.